She stepped off that stagecoach with exactly 17 cents in her pocket and a newspaper ad that turned out to be nothing but lies. The foreman looked her up and down like she was livestock, said she'd be sleeping in a bunkhouse full of men, said she'd work the fields until her hands bled. Most women would have cried. Most women would have begged for mercy. But Lillian Hartley? She looked that man dead in the eye and demanded to see her employment terms in writing. What she didn't know was that this one act of defiance would uncover an $8,000 theft, make her a target for a dangerous enemy, and lead her straight into the arms of the one man who saw her for exactly who she was. This is not a story about being rescued. This is the story of a woman who rescued herself and found love as an unexpected reward. This story proves one powerful truth. Your integrity is your greatest weapon, and the right partner won't try to save you. They'll stand beside you while you save yourself. If you believe women deserve partners, not rescuers, drop a comment below, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you never miss another story that reminds you of your own strength. The Wyoming dust hadn't even settled when Lillian knew the newspaper ad was a lie. The whole landscape felt big and mean, from the jagged mountains to the hard-faced man staring at her. This wasn't a place for a refined lady seeking a household position. The man, whose hat was stained dark with sweat, wasn't refined either. He was built like a bull, with a cruel set to his mouth that spoke of years of getting his own way. His shirt was unbuttoned, showing skin burned the color of old leather. "Well, now, you're a mite smaller than I figured," he said, walking a slow circle around her. The ad said young. Lillian stood tall. "I am 23. The advertisement asked for someone of working age and good character. I believe I fit that bill." The man let out a laugh that sounded like rocks grinding together. "Good character? Ain't that a hoot?" He spat a stream of tobacco juice near her trunk. "Name's Briggs. I'm the foreman. You answer to me." Lillian chose her words with care. "I was under the impression I'd be answering to a Mrs. Mercer." "Mrs. Mercer's been in the ground for 3 years," Briggs snapped. "The old man don't mess with hiring." "I do. And what I need ain't some prissy thing arranging flowers. I need hands in the hayfields. We're short." A cold dread settled in Lillian's gut. She had imagined cooking, maybe cleaning. Not this. "I have no experience with field work," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Oh, you'll learn," Briggs said with a nasty grin. He pointed a thumb toward a long, squat building. "Bunkhouse is over yonder. Breakfast is at 4:30. Work starts at 5. Cause trouble, and you'll be walking back east." The threat hit its mark. Lillian had 17 cents to her name. Her pa had drank his way into an early grave, and her mama had followed soon after, worn out from a hard life. Wyoming was supposed to be a new start, away from men who saw her desperation as an opportunity. Now she was caught in another trap, lured by a promise of respectable work. Briggs stepped closer, his breath smelling of whiskey and sweat. "You got a problem with honest labor, Miss Hartley? The road's right there, nobody's making you stay." Lillian looked down that empty road. The next town was 15 miles of dust and heat away. She looked back at Briggs and saw the smug look on his face. He expected her to fold. He expected her to break, just like every other man had. Right then, something inside her hardened into steel. "First," she said, her voice clear and steady, "I will need to see the terms of my employment in writing. That includes pay, hours, and a clear list of duties." Briggs just stared for a second, his swagger gone. Then his face turned thunderous. "You'll see what I show you and do what you're told. Those are the only terms you need." "Then we have a problem," Lillian replied calmly. "Because I don't work without a proper agreement. I can choose to report this ranch for luring women here under false pretenses. I can tell every newspaper from here to Denver." It was a pure bluff, but her gaze didn't falter. Briggs's hand drifted toward his belt. "Is there a problem here, Briggs?" A new voice cut through the air. A younger man was walking up from the main house. He was maybe 30, with dark hair and a lean build that spoke of hard work, not just giving orders. "No problem, Mr. Mercer," Briggs said, his tone changing in a hurry. "Just settling in the new girl." "Her name is Miss Hartley," the man said, his sharp eyes moving to Lillian. "I'm Cole Mercer. My father owns this ranch." Lillian could only manage a nod, her heart still pounding. "You seem troubled, Miss Hartley," Cole said. "Did something happen?" He was giving her an opening, a chance to speak without directly accusing his foreman. "I was seeking clarity on my employment," she said. "There seems to be a difference between the job advertised and the duties Mr. Briggs has described." Cole's face didn't change, but he stood a little straighter. "What did the advertisement promise you?" "Household management," she said. "And what did Briggs offer you?" Lillian glanced at the foreman, whose eyes were promising a world of hurt. But she'd already started down this path. Field labor and a shared bunkhouse with the men. Cole was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on his foreman. "Briggs, who gave you the authority to change the terms?" "We need bodies for the hay-in." "I didn't ask what we need, I asked who authorized it." The question was quiet, but it was lined with iron. "You were in town. I handled it." "By lying to a woman who traveled 2,000 miles based on our word? That ain't handling it, Briggs. That's fraud." Cole then turned his full attention to Lillian. "Miss Hartley, I apologize. This is not how Copper Hollow does business. Please come with me to the house. I'd like to offer you something you should have had from the start. Actual choices." He lifted her trunk like it weighed nothing. As Lillian followed him, she saw the pure rage on Briggs's face. She'd made a powerful enemy, no doubt about it. But for the first time in a long time, she felt something else too. A little bit of hope. Cole led her to the main house at Copper Hollow, a big, sturdy place made of local wood and river stone. It was built for work, not for show. They went in through a side door to a mudroom where boots and jackets were all lined up neat. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in the cool air, and Lillian felt herself relax just a little. Cole set down her trunk. "You wait right here. I will go get my aunt." He vanished through a doorway, leaving Lillian with her heart pounding. Outside, she saw Briggs stomping toward the bunkhouse, looking mad enough to chew nails. She knew she had made a bad enemy. The door opened again, and an older woman came in with Cole. She looked to be about 60, with gray hair in a tight bun, and eyes that saw everything. "Miss Hartley," the woman said, holding out her hand. "I am Violet Hollis, Cole's aunt." Lillian shook her calloused hand. "Miss Hollis," Violet corrected her with a little smile. "Never saw the need for a husband. Now, sit down. Cole tells me Briggs tried to lie to you." Lillian liked how direct she was. "He said I would be working in the fields." "That do not make it right," Violet said flatly. "That advertisement had my name on it, and I promised household work." She gave Lillian a hard look. "Now, this ain't a Philadelphia parlor." "I am not afraid of work," Lillian replied. "Just honest pay for an honest day's labor." Violet's smile was real. "Good. Here is what I truly need." She ticked the points off on her fingers. 1. Help running this big house. Cooking, cleaning, the whole lot. 2. The ranch's books are a disaster. Cole hates paperwork. And 3. We have a garden that feeds 20 people. She paused. "The pay is $2 a week with room and board, no matter the job. But I will not make you do something you did not sign up for. So tell me, what can you really do?" The direct question caught Lillian off guard. Back home, no one ever asked what she could do. "I am very good with numbers," Lillian said. "I handled my father's books for his shop. I can cook and clean, but I have no strength for field work." "I can organize chaos," Lillian stated simply. "I have run a house on next to nothing." That made Violet's smile grow. "Then I have the job for you. Help me with the books and household accounts. Stop us from wasting money." She looked over at Cole. "No offense, nephew." "None taken," Cole said. "She is right. I bought 6 saddles last month because they were on sale." Lillian asked, "Did you need 6 saddles?" "No." "Then it was not a sale." Violet let out a real laugh. "Oh, I like this one." But Cole stayed serious. "Miss Hartley, you need to know this is not an easy life. We are 15 miles from town. The work is hard and the winters are worse. The men, well, some of them are like Briggs." "I understand," Lillian said. "He will not like me being here." "He will not," Cole agreed. "I'm telling you this plain. I will have your back, but it will not always be easy." He was not trying to sugarcoat it, and that was more respect than she had had in a long time. "Could I see my room?" she asked. Violet led her upstairs to a small private room. It had a bed, a washstand, and a window looking out at the mountains. After sharing a room with 3 other women for 6 months, it felt like a palace. "It is not much," Violet said, "but it is yours, and the door has a lock." "It is perfect," Lillian said, touching the handmade quilt. "You have not even seen the work," Violet chuckled. "I have seen what Mr. Briggs had planned for me," Lillian answered. "A bunkhouse with men, no privacy and no safety. A woman cannot be everywhere at once, Miss Hollis. This room with this lock is worth more than any wages." Violet's face softened a bit. "You have had it rough, I see." "Have not we all?" Violet nodded. "Fair point. Settle in. Supper is at 6. You will meet the old man, Cole's father. He is not a warm man, but he is fair if you earn his respect." After Violet left, Lillian finally sat on the bed and let the shake-in start. She had done it. She stood up to a bully and got honest work and a locked door, but she had also made a powerful enemy on her first day. She looked out the window as the sun set over the mountains, making everything golden. This land was beautiful, but it was hard, just like the people. Lillian took a deep breath, stood up, and started to unpack. She had 3 hours before supper, enough time to wash up and get ready to meet the man who owned it all. She had survived so much to get here. She could survive this too. Supper was in a big dining room with a long wooden table and chairs that did not match. Violet had set out 4 places. Lillian arrived right at 6 o'clock, wearing her one good dress, a practical dark blue wool. Her hair was pinned up tight, and she had scrubbed her hands until they were as clean as Wyoming water would allow. Cole Mercer was already seated, freshly shaved, and in a clean shirt. He stood up when she entered. The older man at the head of the table, though, he just sat there. He was about 65, with a weathered face that had seen too much sun. "This is my father," Cole said. "Samuel Mercer." "Father, this is Miss Lillian Hartley." Samuel looked her over the way a man sizes up livestock. He spoke flatly. "So you are the one who had a run-in with Briggs?" It was not a question. "Yes, sir. Briggs says you have an attitude." "Briggs has a problem with the truth," Lillian said, her voice steady. "I suppose that makes us about even." Violet, who was carrying in a platter of beef, let out a sudden laugh. "Oh, I definitely like her." Samuel did not crack a smile. "Briggs is the foreman on this ranch. He decides who gets hired." "And it seems he makes false promises too," Lillian added. "Are you calling my foreman a liar?" "I am describing a situation where a job was promised that did not exist. If you see it differently, I would be happy to go over the written agreement." She paused for a moment. "Oh, that is right. There was no written agreement. How very convenient for him." The room went dead silent. Cole's face became a perfect mask. Samuel Mercer just stared at Lillian as if a horse had started quoting poetry. Then a sound like a sharp bark broke the quiet. It was a laugh. "Well, you have got some backbone, I will give you that." He pointed to a chair. "Sit down. Let us see what else you have got." Lillian sat, her heart pounding in her chest. She had just sassed the man who owned the whole operation, but there was a hint of respect in his tone that told her she had not made a mistake. Being weak would get her nowhere out here. Violet served the food, a simple and hearty meal of tender beef and potatoes. After a few minutes of quiet eating, Samuel spoke again. "Violet says you are good with figures." "Yes, sir. Prove it." Lillian put down her fork. "The ranch has 5,000 head of cattle and 150 horses. We have 23 men working year-round. Last year, we sold 3,000 head for $18 each. What was our total income from those cattle?" $54,000, Lillian answered without hesitation. "If the hands make $30 a month, what is our yearly payroll?" "The base pay for 23 men is $8,280, she said. "I would need to see the seasonal hiring records to give you an exact total." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "Feed for the horses costs $60 a head for the year. What is that total?" $9,000. "But," she added, "I would ask why you are feeding young colts the same expensive grain as the working horses. They do not need it." This time Samuel Mercer smiled. It was not a warm smile, but it was approval. "She is right," he said, looking at Cole. "We waste money on that. Why have you not caught it?" "Because I cannot stand paperwork," Cole said simply. "Well, now you have got someone who can," Samuel said, turning back to Lillian. "You start on the books tomorrow. I want a full report on where we are losing money in 2 weeks." Lillian nodded. "I will need access to everything. All the financial records, receipts, and payroll." "Violet will show you where the books are," Samuel said. "What books there are," Violet mumbled under her breath. "Then I will need time to get them organized first," Lillian stated. "Take the time you need, but get me results," Samuel ordered. "And Miss Hartley, Briggs will not appreciate you digging into the ranch's business. I do not imagine he will. He especially will not like a woman questioning him. I am not questioning him. I am reviewing the financial records. If they happen to show questionable choices, that is on him, not me." Samuel almost smiled again. "Fair point. But you watch your back. Briggs has been here for 8 years, and the men are loyal to him." "Is he loyal to you?" Lillian asked. The question hung in the air like smoke. Samuel looked at her with a new kind of intensity. "You are asking if I will stand with you against my own foreman. I am asking if the truth matters more to you than keeping things easy. That depends on the truth. Then I will make sure my truth is beyond any doubt." After a long silence, Samuel gave a single, sharp nod. "See that you do. And Miss Hartley, do not think because I am direct that I will protect you. You have to earn your place here, same as everybody else. I would not have it any other way, sir." The rest of dinner was more relaxed. They talked about the ranch and Lillian's long journey out west. But beneath it all, Lillian felt the enormous weight of her promise. She had been hired to find problems, to challenge a man who already disliked her. It was either the bravest thing she had ever done, or the most foolish. That night in her small room, Lillian wrote a letter she could not mail. "Dear Mother, I have made it to Wyoming. It is more beautiful and more frightening than I ever imagined. For the first time in so long, I feel like I am on solid ground. I do not miss who I was back in Philadelphia, always afraid and always apologizing. Here, they expect you to stand up straight and prove you are worth something. It is terrifying. And it is exactly what I needed. Your daughter, Lillian." She folded the letter and put it away. For now, it was enough just to write down the truth. Outside her window, the ranch was quiet, except for the low voices of men and the soft sounds of horses. Tomorrow, she would start the real work. Tomorrow, she would have to face Briggs again, but this time, she would have Samuel Mercer's authority behind her. Tonight, though, in her simple room, she felt something that had been gone for years. She felt a glimmer of hope. She pulled the quilt up to her chin and, for the first time in months, slept deeply. Whatever was coming, she would be ready for it. The sun wasn't even thinking about rising over Copper Hollow when the chow bell rang. 4:30 in the morning, just as Briggs had promised. Lillian dressed in a plain brown skirt and a simple white shirt, tying her hair back. In the kitchen, a woman named Violet was already working a stove big enough to feed an army. "Coffee's on the table," she said, not even turning around. "Get some in you, then start on that bread." We got hungry cowboys coming. Lillian poured a cup of coffee that was black, strong, and bitter. She started slicing the warm bread just as the first ranch hands started stomping the dust off their boots at the door. They smelled of horses and leather. Most gave Violet a nod and Lillian a curious look before finding a seat. Briggs came in last, his face a thundercloud. He stared at Lillian for a hard second, then sat down with his back turned clear to her. "Trouble?" Violet whispered. "Always," Lillian whispered back. They served up platters of eggs, bacon, and bread. The men ate hard and fast, talking little. After the men cleared out, Violet led Lillian to a small office. "The books are in here," she said. "What's left of them?" It was pure chaos. Papers spilled out of drawers and were stacked on every chair and flat surface. Some were neat ledgers. Others were just notes scribbled on the back of old envelopes. "How long's it been this way?" Lillian asked, standing in the doorway. "Since Cole's mother passed on 3 years back. She kept it all straight," Violet said with a shrug. "After that, Samuel threw himself into the cattle. Cole took over the horses. Briggs handled the buy-in. Nobody paid the numbers much mind." "And you want me to make sense of it," Lillian said. "I want you to find the truth in it," Violet's voice got low. "Because I've seen the accounts when I can, and something don't add up. We're selling plenty of cattle and horses, but we're always short on cash." "You think someone's stealing?" "I think someone's mighty creative with the numbers, but I can't prove it. I ain't smart enough with figures to see the trick." Violet looked Lillian square in the eye. "Are you?" Lillian gave a slow nod. "I'll need time. Weeks, maybe." "Take it," Violet said. "Just be careful." With that, Lillian rolled up her sleeves and started wrangling the paper chaos. She sorted everything by month, making piles for sales, payroll, and purchases. By noon, she'd barely made a dent. She ate a sandwich right there at the desk and kept working. The sun was getting low when she found the first one. It was a purchase order for feed. The numbers in 2 different spots didn't match. The ranch had been charged for the higher amount, a difference of $50. It could have been a simple mistake. But an hour later, she'd found 3 more, all small, all off by a little, and all signed by Briggs. Her heart started to pound. This was it. It wasn't one big theft. It was a slow, steady bleed. A few dollars here, a few there. The question was, where was the money going? A knock at the door made her jump. It was Cole holding his hat. "Violet said you've been in here all day. Figured you could use some air." "I'm right in the middle of something," Lillian started. "It'll be here tomorrow," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Come on, I want to show you something." She hesitated, but her back ached and her eyes burned. Fresh air sounded real good. Cole led her outside toward the barn as the sky started to burn with sunset colors. He walked with an easy stride, pointing things out. "That's the main stable, holds about 40 head. The breeding stock is out in the north pasture." Lillian just listened, letting the big open sky calm her nerves after being cooped up in that office all day. They stopped at a fence overlooking a wide valley with mountains in the distance. "The West can be hard on folks who ain't built for it," Cole said, leaning on the fence. "You seem to be holding your own. You walked into a tough spot and spent your first day digging into work that's bound to make you enemies." "Should I have run away?" Lillian asked, meeting his gaze. "That depends on what you're looking for. If you want safety, you won't find it anywhere. At least here I have a chance to build something." Cole was quiet for a minute. Then he said, "Violet told me what she asked you to do. Did you find anything?" "I found things that don't add up," she said carefully. "I don't know if they're mistakes or something worse. I need more time. And if it is something worse, then I'll tell your father," Lillian said, turning to face him. "I didn't come here to make friends, Mr. Mercer. I came here to do a job. If that means pointing out an ugly truth, then that's what I'll do." A hint of a smile touched Cole's face. "You've got more grit than you let on, Miss Hartley." "I've had to," she replied. They stood there in a comfortable quiet, a real quiet that Lillian hadn't heard since she left home. It wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. "I ought to get back," she finally said. "Don't work yourself into the ground," he advised. "This place'll do that if you let it." As they walked back to the house, Cole spoke casually. "Briggs asked my father to fire you this morning." Lillian's stomach dropped. "What did your father say?" "He told Briggs that if you were disruptive and disrespectful, you'd fit right in with the rest of this ranch." Cole gave a quick, real smile. "Then he told him to mind his own business and let you do your job." Relief washed over her. "So, I'm safe for now." "For now," Cole said, and he used her first name for the first time. "But Lillian, Briggs is a proud man. You've made him look bad twice now. A man like that holds a grudge." "I'll be careful," she said again. But back in that office, surrounded by the proof, she wondered if careful was going to be enough. At Copper Hollow, everything was about to change, and she was the one holding the match. As she dug into the ranch's messy records, the problems started piling up. It was not just the feed, it was everything. She found orders for lumber with two different prices, one on the invoice and another on the payment. She saw bills for tools from sellers who charged far too much. Worst of all, she found payments going out to men who did not even work on the ranch. They were ghost workers. It was a whole system of inflated bills and kickbacks, all of it carefully hidden. And every single fake record had Briggs's signature on it. After 2 weeks, Lillian had a simple report that laid out the whole ugly truth. She had checked every purchase, every vendor, and every dollar that had been stolen from Copper Hollow over the past 3 years. The total was just over $8,000. It was not enough to ruin the ranch, but it was enough to bleed it dry slowly. She sat alone in the office late one evening, looking at the neat columns of numbers. She wondered if she was about to make the biggest mistake of her entire life. Samuel Mercer knew he was in a bind. You just cannot ignore that much money walking out the door. But doing something meant he had to face Briggs, and Briggs had run this place for 8 years. He had half the ranch hands in his pocket, and a mean streak a mile wide. On the other side was Lillian, who had only been at Copper Hollow for 2 weeks. She did not have any friends to speak of, and no real power. But the numbers she found told a story that could not be silenced. Lillian knew this was a dangerous truth, but she never was one to back down. She picked up her report, took a deep breath, and went to find the boss. She found him in his study, a place that smelled like old books and pipe tobacco. He was sitting behind a huge desk. When she knocked, he looked up over his glasses. "Miss Hartley," he said, "I was expecting you 3 days ago." She stepped in. "I had to be certain." He nodded. "Well, let's hear it." Lillian laid the papers on his desk. "Over the last 3 years, Copper Hollow has lost about $8,000. It looks like fake purchases, padded bills, and payments to workers who do not exist. All of it was approved by your foreman." Samuel's face gave nothing away as he started to read. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Lillian's hands were trembling, so she hid them behind her back. At last, Samuel put the report down. "So you are saying Briggs is a thief?" "I am showing you the proof of it," she corrected. "The paperwork supports the claim." "Paperwork," he scoffed. "You have had 2 weeks to cook up whatever you wanted." Those words stung like a whip. Lillian could barely breathe. "I am sorry. What was that?" "You heard me," he said, leaning back. "You show up, make an enemy of my foreman right off the bat, and now you just happen to find evidence that would get him fired. That is quite a coincidence." Her shock turned into a cold, hard anger. "You believe I faked all of this?" "I believe you are smart, and desperate people do clever things to keep a job." "Then check it yourself," Lillian shot back, her voice sharp. "Every bill is in your files. Every business I called is right here in town. If you think I am a liar, then you go prove it." Samuel just stared at her for a long time. "Briggs has been loyal for 8 years. The men respect him. You have been here 14 days. Why should I take your word over his?" "Because my word has proof," she said, stepping a little closer. "Look, I get it. It is easier to think I am the problem. I am new, and getting rid of your foreman would certainly help me. But just look at those numbers, Mr. Mercer. Either I am the cleverest liar you have ever met, or Briggs has been robbing you blind. Which one of those sounds more likely?" The silence that followed was heavy. You could feel the weight of his decision. Finally, Samuel picked up her report again. "Get out," he said, not unkindly. "I will look at this myself. If your numbers are true, we will talk. If they are not, you will be on the next ride out of here." It was not the victory she wanted, but it was not a flat-out defeat either. She gave a single nod and walked out, her knees feeling a little weak. In the hall, she almost ran right into Cole. "Whoa, steady there," he said, grabbing her arm. "You look like you have just seen a ghost." "I just told your father his foreman is a crook," she said. "He thinks I made it all up." Cole's face became hard to read. "Did you?" The question felt like a punch to the gut. Lillian pulled her arm away. "You too?" "I am just asking," he said calmly. "Did you fake anything to get ahead here?" "No," she said, her voice flat. "Every last number in that report is the gospel truth." That it was not enough. I was too new, and being a woman meant I could not be trusted. Cole was quiet for a second, then said, "Show me. Show me the proof. If it is real, I will know. I have worked alongside Briggs for 8 years. I know how he operates." Lillian wanted to say no out of pure pride, but good sense took over. She led Cole to the office and spread out the papers, the ledgers, and the receipts. She pointed out every lie, showing him how the numbers were inflated, how men who did not exist got paid, and how deep the whole rotten scheme went. Cole just listened, his face growing harder with every page she turned. When she finished, he leaned back and scrubbed a hand over his face. "How did I not see this?" "You were not looking for it," she said. "Why would you? You trusted him." "My mother trusted him first. He came to work for us right after she lost her foreman in an accident. She said he was a good, solid man." Cole's voice sounded empty. She would be heartbroken to know he was stealing from us while she was dying. Lillian had not expected that kind of pain from him. "Your father still might not believe it," she said carefully. "Oh, he will believe it." Cole stood, gathering the papers. "I am taking these to him myself. He might just think you are looking for trouble." "He might," Cole said. "But I would rather stand with the truth and be wrong than stand with a lie." He stopped at the door. "Thank you, Lillian. I know this was not easy." After he was gone, Lillian just sat there listening to the sounds of the ranch winding down for the night. All she had done was find the truth. Now all she could do was wait and hope the truth mattered. The knock on her door came with the sunrise. Lillian had barely slept, expecting the worst. Maybe Briggs breaking down her door or angry ranch hands telling her to get out. Instead, it was Violet, her face etched with worry. "Samuel wants to see you in his study. Right now." Lillian dressed in a hurry. The main house was quiet, too quiet. Usually the kitchen was a loud mess of breakfast, but now there was only silence and the smell of stale coffee. The study door was open. Inside, she found Samuel, Cole, and Briggs. The foreman stood by the window, looking like a thundercloud. Cole leaned against a wall with his arms crossed. Samuel sat at his desk with her report open before him. "Miss Hartley," Samuel said, "I spent all night going over your numbers. I even rode into town before dawn to talk to some vendors." He paused. "Your report is 100% accurate." Lillian felt a weight lift off her, but she kept her face calm. "I am glad you were able to confirm it. Briggs claims all of this is just honest mistakes, a few clerical errors he missed." Lillian looked over at Briggs. His eyes were full of pure hate. "And do you believe that?" she asked Samuel. "No." Samuel's voice was like stone. "Because honest mistakes do not fall into a pattern. They do not always favor the same people, and they sure do not involve paying men who are not even here." He turned to Briggs. "You are fired. You have until noon to get your things and be off my land." Briggs's face turned pale, then red with rage. You are taking her word over mine, a woman who has been here 2 weeks? I am taking the evidence over loyalty. There is a big difference. This is her doing. Briggs pointed a shaking finger at Lillian. She came here to stir up trouble, and you were fool enough to listen to her. I listen to the numbers, Samuel said, his voice cold. They do not lie. Now get out before I have my men throw you out. Briggs looked at Cole. Cole, you know me. Are you just going to stand there and let her ruin me? Cole looked him straight in the eye. I am going to let you face what you have done. You stole from this ranch while my mother was on her deathbed. You stole from my father and from every honest man who works here. His voice was low but sharp as a knife. You ruined yourself. For a heart-stopping moment, Lillian thought Briggs was going to lunge at her. But then Samuel stood up, and something in the old man's stance made Briggs back down. You will regret this, Briggs snarled at Lillian. All of you, this whole place will fall apart without me. Get out, Samuel said one more time. Briggs stormed out, slamming the door so hard it shook the house. The silence he left behind felt heavy. Samuel sat back down. Miss Hartley, you have worked here for 2 weeks and already cost me my foreman. I am not sure if that is impressive or a complete disaster. I just did the job you hired me to do, sir. You did more than that. You found a snake in the grass and called him out, knowing it would make you an enemy. Samuel's face gave nothing away. That takes either a lot of courage or a lot of foolishness. Sometimes they are the same thing. A small smile touched Samuel's lips. True enough. He looked at Cole. We need a new foreman, someone the men will follow who will not rob us blind. Cole pushed himself off the wall. I will do it, at least until we find someone for good. You have enough to do with the horses. Then my days will just get longer. We do not have another choice, Father. The hands need a boss, especially right now. Samuel nodded. All right, but we start looking for a permanent man immediately. Agreed. Cole then turned to Lillian. You ought to stay inside today. Keep clear of the bunkhouse. Some of the hands are still loyal to Briggs, and they will not be happy about this. But I have work to do, Lillian said. The work can wait. Your safety cannot. His tone was protective, and it made her pause. She nodded. I will be careful. After they left, Lillian could hear shouting from the bunkhouse. Briggs was telling his side of the story, and it sounded like some of the men were believing him. Standing there alone, listening to men who did not even know her curse her name, Lillian felt a deep chill of isolation. The rest of the day proved she was right to be afraid. She stayed inside, trying to focus on the account books while the air outside crackled with tension. She saw men gathered in angry little groups, and twice she heard her name shouted, followed by mean laughter. Violet brought her lunch, her face full of worry. Cole is talking to the men now, but some of them, she said, shaking her head, they will not care about proof. All they see is the woman who got their foreman fired. Should I just leave? Lillian asked in a small voice. And go where? You do not have money for a ticket, and no family to send for you. Violet's voice was kind, but firm. Besides, if you run now, you will just prove them right. The best thing you can do is stay and show them they are wrong. How can I do that when they will not even look at me? By doing your job so well, they cannot ignore you, by being fair and honest every single day. Violet squeezed her shoulder. You have got a strong backbone, girl. Use it. After Violet left, Lillian went back to her numbers. They were clean and logical. They did not take sides. She was lost in her work when Cole knocked. How bad is it? She asked. 6 hands quit. Said they would not work for a ranch that listened to a woman over a good foreman. Cole's voice was flat. The others are staying, but I would say about half are not happy. Lillian put her pen down. I am sorry. Do not be. If they would rather stand with a thief, we are better off without them. He came into the room and closed the door. But I have to ask you something, and I need a completely honest answer. All right. Are you safe here? The question caught her by surprise. What do you mean by that? I mean you have made enemies. Briggs is gone, but he has friends. Some of the men who stayed are still on his side, and plenty of them do not think a woman should have the authority you do. Cole's eyes were serious. Then I'm worried about what happens next. Are you feeling safe? Lillian thought about that for a second. She did not feel completely safe, but then again she never really had. I feel about the same as I did yesterday, she answered. I know there is danger, but I'm not going to let it run me off. Cole almost cracked a smile. That is a careful answer. It is the honest one. I will not pretend I am not scared, but if I run every time a man gets angry, I will be running my whole life. Fair enough, Cole said, looking out the window. My father wants me to have someone keep an eye on you, just to be sure you're not bothered. Lillian did not like the sound of that. I do not need a babysitter. Yes, you do, Cole said firmly. I know you are tough, but being tough is not the same as being foolish. If something were to happen to you, I could not live with it. Hearing him say her first name, hearing the real worry in his voice made something inside her soften. Who did you have in mind? Thomas Weaver. He's a good man, been here 5 years. He will just walk with you to and from your room. That is all. And if I say no, she challenged, then I will assign him anyway, and you will just have to put up with it. That made her laugh. It was a tired, shaky sound, but it was real. You are a stubborn man, Mr. Mercer. It runs in the family, Miss Hartley. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then Cole cleared his throat. I should get back to it. We are short a man now. After he was gone, Lillian sat there feeling a strange warmth spread through her chest. It was more than just being thankful. She told herself to focus on her work, that she was not here to catch feelings for the owner's son. But that warm feeling stayed with her. The weeks that followed were tense. Lillian got the ranch's books in order, putting new rules in place to stop any more stealing. Thomas Weaver was a quiet shadow, always there but never in the way. The ranch hands split right down the middle. Half of them were polite and respectful. The other half acted like she was invisible. She learned to live with it. She just put her head down and did her job better than anyone could have expected. She tried to ignore it when she heard men praise Briggs, the man who had stolen from them all. It was draining, like walking on a wire every single day. Cole took over as foreman and worked himself to the bone. Lillian saw him from sunup to sundown, running the crew, settling fights, and doctoring horses late into the night. You're going to wear yourself out, she told him one night in the barn. He looked awful, his face pale with exhaustion. Cannot afford to, he mumbled, fixing a piece of leather. The men are watching me. If I show any weakness, I will lose them. You will lose a lot more than that if you work yourself into an early grave. I will be fine. You look terrible. That got his attention. He looked up, and a small smile touched his lips. You know, most folks are a little nicer when they say that. Most folks are not telling you the truth, she replied. I do not see the point in lying. Cole put down his work. Why is that? Most women I know are good at being polite. Most women, she said, have not had to live on the truth to survive. Alone. Lillian leaned on the stall door, her voice low. When you have nothing, honesty is all you have to sell. It is my only real currency. Cole studied her in the dim light. That is not true, is it? I came to this place with just a trunk and 17 cents. My competence and my honesty are what built my value here. If I start lying to make folks feel better, I lose the one thing that makes me useful. Is that what you really believe? He asked. That your only worth is in being useful? The question shook her. What else is there? Your mind, your courage, he said, stepping closer. You refuse to stand for injustice even when it would make your life so much easier. Lillian, you are worth more than the work you do. His warm voice and the look in his eyes made her heart flutter. She took a step back. I have to go. Violet will be looking for me. She turned and left before he could say another word, her heart pounding. Back in her room, she tried to calm down, pressing her hands to her hot cheeks. That was foolish, just foolish. Cole Mercer was the son of the ranch owner. She was just the hired help. Any hint of a relationship between them would ruin her. He was just being kind, she told herself, just like he had been from the start. But as she lay in bed staring at the dark ceiling, she could not make herself believe it was only kindness. That thought scared her more than anything. The summer heat deepened, turning the air into a shimmering haze. Out in the golden hayfield, every able body was needed to bring in the harvest. Lillian watched from her office as the men worked under the brutal sun, their shirts soaked with sweat. Cole was out there among them, working harder than anyone, leading by pure example. At breakfast, she had seen how tired he was, an exhaustion that went clear to the bone. She wanted to tell him to take care of himself, but she knew he would just say the ranch could not wait. So she said nothing and went back to her ledgers, a knot of worry in her stomach. By the middle of July, she had completely reorganized the ranch's finances. Every purchase had paperwork. Every payment required a signature from Cole or his father, Samuel. The books were now clear, easy to track, and honest. It should have felt like a great success. Instead, she felt a new kind of worry. With the books so clean, her main job was finished. She had been hired to fix a big problem, and she had done it. Now Samuel had to decide if it made sense to keep her on. The thought of leaving Copper Hollow made her chest feel tight. She was still thinking about this one afternoon when Violet came into the office, looking troubled. "There is talk in town," Violet said plainly. "About you and Cole." Lillian's stomach sank. "What kind of talk? The kind that says you have your sights set on the boss's son? That you are planning to marry your way into an easy life?" Violet's voice was gentle. "It is all nonsense, of course, but gossip like that spreads fast. And right now, a lot of people are watching to see what kind of woman you are." "I have done nothing wrong," Lillian said, and she hated how defensive she sounded. "I know that," Violet said, sitting down. "And Cole knows that. But how things look to other people matters, especially for a woman in your position. The problem is Cole has been very protective of you. Everybody sees it, and some folks are starting to imagine things." Violet's gaze was sharp as a tack. "You have feelings for him, don't you?" Lillian wanted to deny it, to say it was just respect for a fair boss. But she had built her life on telling the truth, and she wasn't about to start lying now. "I don't rightly know," she finally said. "Sometimes it feels like he's just being decent. Other times—" She trailed off, not knowing how to explain the way her heart hammered when he looked her way. "Other times it feels like a whole lot more," Violet finished for her. "And that scares you to death." "Of course it did. I'm just the hired help, and folks already whisper that I'm trouble. He's the son of the man who owns this whole spread. Even if he did feel something, it would ruin us both. Any move he made would just prove all the ugly rumors right." "So what are you fixin' to do?" Lillian laid her hands flat on the desk, feeling the solid oak. "The only thing I can do. Keep my head down, do my job, and prove I'm here to work, not to chase after him." "That's going to be tough," Violet said softly, "especially if he ain't interested in keeping his distance." "Then he'll just have to learn," she said, "because I won't be the woman who wrecks his good name." But staying away from Cole was harder than she reckoned. With fewer hands on the ranch, everyone worked shoulder to shoulder. Cole seemed to be everywhere at once, overseeing the hay harvest or settling squabbles between men. Every time Lillian laid eyes on him, her resolve melted like butter on a hot skillet. Things came to a head on a blistering afternoon in late July. Lillian had offered to take water out to the men in the far pasture, mostly just to get out of the stuffy office. She drove the wagon out herself, enjoying the breeze. The hayfield was a picture of organized chaos, the air thick with the smell of cut grass and honest sweat. She passed out canteens, getting thankful nods from most and stony silence from a few others. She was nearly done when she spotted Cole. His shirt was soaked clean through with sweat, and his hat was pulled down low. As she got closer, a knot of fear tightened in her stomach. His face was flushed a dangerous shade of red. His breathing was shallow, and his hand shook when he reached for the canteen. "When's the last time you had any water?" she asked, her voice sharp. "I'm fine," he rasped. "The devil you are." You're about to fall over from the heat. Lillian shoved the canteen at him. Drink it, all of it. You need to not pass out in front of your crew. Her voice was low but fierce as a hornet. Drink the water, Cole. That is not a suggestion. Something in her tone made him listen. He drank it all down, and she saw the color in his face ease up a bit. There's shade by the wagon, she told him. Go sit for 10 minutes. I can't just... Yes, you can. You're the acting foreman. When he still didn't move, she added softly, Please, for me. That did it. He followed her to the wagon and slumped down in its shadow. Lillian wet her own handkerchief and handed it to him. Put this on your neck. He did, closing his eyes. You sure get bossy when you're worried. I'm not worried. I'm stopping a disaster. But her own hands were shaking as she felt for his pulse. Cole gently caught her wrist. Hold on now. Your own heart is racing. He looked right at her, his eyes dark and serious, filled with something that stole her breath. I'm all right, he said, his voice low. Thanks to you. Wouldn't need saving if you just take care of yourself. I know. I'm working on it. His thumb drew a slow circle on the inside of her wrist, sending a jolt straight up her arm. You shouldn't worry about me so much. Somebody has to. You're clearly... It was impossible. Is that the only reason? That question just hung there in the air, full of lightning. Lillian knew good and well she ought to back off and keep things professional like she promised herself. But his hand felt so warm, and his eyes were looking right through her. No, she whispered. That is not the only reason. Just then, one of the hands walked up, mopping sweat from his brow. Cole, we got trouble with the bailing equipment. Can you come take a look? The spell was broken. Cole let go of her wrist. I will be right there. He turned back to her. We need to talk later, please. Lillian just nodded, not trusting her own voice. She watched him walk off, a strange tingle still on her wrist. This was the exact mess she had been trying to avoid. But driving that empty wagon back, she could not help but wonder what he was fixing to say. Samuel's deep voice rumbled. I do not care what folks in town are saying. The girl has done fine work. The girl, another voice cut in, has got Cole so turned around he cannot see straight. Half the men figure she is playing him for a fool. And the other half, Cole said, his own voice quiet and dangerous, the other half think you are the one playing her. Either way, it is causing trouble. The men are picking sides and making bets on it all. Lillian felt a sickness rise in her stomach. What exactly are you getting at? Cole asked, his words cold and sharp. I am saying you either make your intentions known or you send her on her way. This in-between is pulling the ranch apart. My intentions, Cole said slowly, are not any of their business. Then Violet's voice sliced through the tension. Maybe you should worry more about the character of your men than their opinions. Any hand more interested in gossip than work can find a job somewhere else. Lillian knew she should have walked away, but her feet felt nailed to the floor. They are not all wrong, Samuel said after a bit. This whole thing cannot go on like it is. What thing? Cole's voice was tight. A good employee doing her job. A good employee you are starting to feel something for. Do not you bother denying it. I can see it plain as day. After a long quiet, Cole finally spoke. She is special, Father. She is smart and brave and honest. And yes, I have feelings for her. But I would never do anything to hurt her reputation. But you want to? That does not matter. The hell it does not. Son, she has earned her spot here at Copper Hollow fair and square. But talk is talk, and it will hurt her more than you. So what do you suggest? I suggest you figure out what you truly want. If you want an employee, keep your distance. If you want something more, then you court her. Court her right and proper, out in the open. Give folks no reason to talk. Dora then, her heart just hammering. She looked out her window at the mountains, trying to make sense of it all. Cole had feelings for her, and his own father was telling him to court her. It should have felt like a win. Instead, it felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff. If he courted her, people would say she had trapped him, that she had schemed her way into becoming the ranch wife. Every ugly rumor would look true to them. But if she said no, she would be choosing to be alone, maybe forever. She would be turning her back on the one real connection she had felt in years. An hour later, a soft knock came at her door. It was Cole holding his hat in his hands. "May I speak with you?" They went downstairs to the formal parlor, a room they hardly ever used. He pointed to a chair and sat across from her, keeping a respectable space between them. "I have to be honest with you," he began. "You likely heard the argument. Some of it. Then you know people are talking about us." He looked her straight in the eye. "And that talk is not coming from nowhere. I have developed feelings for you, Lillian. Real, strong feelings." Lillian could hardly breathe. Hearing him say it so plainly left her with nowhere to hide. "I know this puts you in a hard spot," Cole went on. "I know folks will judge you and say you planned all this to get ahead. I know that is not fair at all." "Then why are you telling me?" she asked. "Why not just keep your distance?" "Because I have tried that. For weeks I told myself it was just gratitude, or that I was just lonely. But it is more." He leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. "You challenge me, Lillian. You call me out on my mistakes. You see this ranch, and you see me with clear eyes. You are the first woman who has ever treated me like a man instead of some prize." "That is because I do not see you as a prize," Lillian said softly. "I see a good man trying to do right by his people. A man who works himself to the bone to prove he is worthy." Cole's face softened. "Then you see why I cannot just let this go. Why I had to tell you what I feel and what I want. What do you want? Your permission to court you. Properly. Publicly. I want to take you to town dances and to church. I want people to see my intentions are honorable. I want to give you a real choice. The kind I have been too scared to offer. The choice to say yes or no without you having to worry about your job here." Lillian's throat felt tight. "And if I say no? Then you keep your job, your room, everything. Nothing will change. My father has already agreed. Your place here is based on your work, not on me. It was a perfect offer, safe and fair. But it made what she had to say next so much harder. Cole, if I say yes, every person who ever whispered about me will think they were right. They will say I came here just to find a husband. They will say I made up the proof against Briggs just to get close to you. I know, and you are asking me to face that anyway? No good at it." Cole shook his head. "I'm asking you to let me stand with you right out in the open. Let me make it so plain that anyone who questions you has to question me, too. We'll face the talk together, and we'll prove 'em wrong by just being honest. That could take years. I've got time. They might not ever believe us. Then we'll build a life where we don't need them to." He stood up and knelt in front of her chair so they were eye to eye. "Lillian, I'm not offering you an easy road. I'm offering to walk it with you, as a partner who sees just how good you are. But only if you want that, too. Only if you think I'm worth the risk." Lillian looked into his eyes and saw the plain, vulnerable truth. He meant every single word. The real question was if she was brave enough to let him. She thought about all the years she'd spent trying to be small and quiet to avoid judgment. She thought about coming out here with 17 cents and a lie for a promise. She had stood up to Briggs, knowing it would make her enemies, choosing what was right over what was safe. She'd been brave in small ways her whole life. Maybe it was time to be brave in a big way. "Yes," she whispered. "Court me. Out in the open, the proper way. And we'll prove them all wrong together." Cole's face lit up with pure joy. He took her hand so gently, like she was made of glass. "Thank you," he said. "I promise I'll do everything I can to be worthy of your trust." "You already are," Lillian told him. "That's why I'm saying yes." He raised her hand and kissed her knuckles, a brief touch full of promise. Then he stood, stepping back to be proper. I'll talk to my father tonight. We'll announce it at Sunday dinner. We won't give anyone a chance to whisper behind your back." After he was gone, Lillian sat there, trying to catch her breath. She had said yes to being courted publicly, to facing down all the gossip and judgment head-on. It was terrifying. But she realized it was also the first time in her life she'd chosen something just because she wanted it, not because it was the safe or sensible thing to do. She had chosen Cole Mercer, a complicated, tired, and honest man. She had chosen a chance at love over the guarantee of being alone. Whatever happened next, she would face it with a straight spine and a stubborn refusal to let fear make her small. Sunday dinner at Copper Hollow was always a big to-do. When Samuel announced at breakfast that there would be a special announcement, the entire ranch was buzzing with talk. Lillian spent the morning feeling a mix of panic and resolve, her hands only steady by sheer willpower as she helped Violet set the long dining table. "You sure about this?" Violet asked, fiddling with a fork. "No," Lillian admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." "Well," Violet said with a small smile, "that's either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever heard. But at least you're facing the gossip head-on." The guests started showing up around noon, neighboring ranchers, the town preacher, and a few important businessmen from the settlement 15 miles north. Lillian saw the plan right away. Samuel was gathering powerful witnesses. Whatever they announced today would spread through Wyoming like a prairie fire. She wore her best dress, a dark blue wool she'd fixed up to look almost new. She pinned her hair up a little softer than usual. When she caught her reflection in the mirror, she almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. The desperate woman who had stepped off that stagecoach 2 months ago was gone. In her place was someone who looked for all the world like she was ready for anything. Almost. Cole was waiting for her at the bottom of the stairs. Had settled, the look on his face when he saw her took her breath away. He was in a clean suit with his dark hair combed back. He looked exactly like a rancher's son should, strong and sure of himself. "You look beautiful," he said softly. "You look scared," she answered. "I am," he admitted. "But I am here anyway." He offered her his arm. "Are you ready?" "Not at all." "Good," he said. "Neither am I. We can be brave together." The dining room buzzed with talk and smelled of Violet's good cooking. Lillian felt every single eye on her as she walked in with Cole. She saw the surprise and questions on their faces. She kept her back straight and her face calm, remembering everything her mother taught her about dignity. Samuel sat at the head of the table. He waited until everyone was served before he stood up with his glass. "Thank you all for coming," he said, his voice filling the room. "As you know, we have made some changes at Copper Hollow. We have improved how we do things, fixed our finances, and we found some fraud in our management." A few men nodded. Everyone knew about the Briggs trouble by then. "These improvements are mostly thanks to the incredible work of Miss Lillian Hartley," Samuel said, gesturing to her, "with just her wits and a whole lot of grit." Lillian felt a flush of heat rise in her face as every eye in the room landed on her. Samuel cleared his throat. "There has been some talk going around about Miss Hartley and about my son's feelings for her. Well, today we are putting all that gossip to rest." He nodded at Cole. "Son." Cole stood up, his jaw set firm. "Thank you, Father. I will be plain about this. I asked Miss Hartley if I could court her, and she said yes. My intentions are honorable. I am doing this out in the open, with my family's blessing, and with the utmost respect for her." A heavy silence fell over the table. Then Mrs. Patterson from the next ranch over finally spoke. "That all seems mighty sudden. The girl has only been here 2 months. Long enough to prove her value," Samuel stated, "and long enough for my son to see her quality." "Or long enough for a smart woman to play her cards right," another man chimed in. "Mr. Thornton, a businessman from town." Before Lillian could even flinch, Cole's voice cut in, low and dangerous. "Mr. Thornton, I will ask you to speak of the woman I am courting with respect. Miss Hartley has done nothing but honest work here. If you are suggesting something else, you had better have proof." Thornton looked a bit flustered. I am just saying what everyone is thinking, that it is all very convenient. The timing, Lillian said, her voice shaking just a little, has nothing to do with the truth. I came to Wyoming for a job. I found one, and I did it well. Along the way, I came to admire a man who treated me with more decency than I have ever known. She looked Thornton square in the eye. If you find that so hard to believe, maybe you should ask yourself why a woman earning respect on her own merit seems so suspicious to you. A few guests gasped. Mrs. Patterson, however, let out a laugh. Well said, Miss Hartley. I do admire a woman with some backbone. She turned to her husband. Henry, did I not tell you this one was made of stronger stuff? And did I not hear she saved this ranch $8,000 by uncovering that fraud? Is that right, Samuel? Every last word, Samuel said. And the books are open for anyone to see. You are sure she did not cook up that story to make herself look good? Asked Mr. Winters, another rancher. I went over every single number myself, Samuel said, his voice like ice. So did Cole. The swindle was real. Miss Hartley knew finding it would make her trouble, but she did it anyway. That is not scheming. That is integrity. The talk went on, but Cole's presence beside her was a comfort. When someone brought up the propriety of it all, Cole answered calmly. Miss Hartley's job at Copper Hollow is secure, no matter what happens between us. My father agrees her work stands on its own. She can tell me no without worrying about her position here. And what if the courtship does not work out? Mrs. Patterson asked gently. Then she keeps her job, if she wants it, Cole said. We are grown-ups. We know this might not lead to marriage, but we would rather face that possibility head-on than hide from it. Lillian felt a weight lift from her shoulders. He meant it. This was not some show. This was just Cole, being the direct and honest man he always was. The rest of the meal was lighter, though Lillian could still feel some folks judging her from across the table. But as the afternoon passed, things started to change. Maybe it was how proudly Cole spoke of her work, or how Samuel backed her up without hesitation. By the time dessert came, the air had cleared. After everyone left, Lillian helped Violet with the dishes. That went better than I figured, Violet said. Half of them think I'm a gold digger, Lillian replied. Only half? Sounds like progress to me, Violet said with a grin. Besides, the people who matter, like the Pattersons, they were on your side. The rest of them will find someone new to gossip about by next week. That is just how these small towns are. Lillian hoped she was right, but a knot of worry remained. She had put a target on her own back. Just then, Cole appeared at the kitchen door. Come take a walk with me. Violet waved them off. Go on, I can handle this. The evening air was cool and peaceful. Cole led her toward a fence overlooking the valley as the setting sun painted the mountains gold. You were something else today, Cole said once they were alone. The way you put Thornton in his place, I have never seen him so quiet. I probably should not have been so sharp. Yes, you should have. He was attacking your good name. You had every right to defend it. He leaned on the fence. I know this was not easy putting our business out there for everyone to judge. It had to be done, Lillian said. It is better than letting rumors fester. Do you regret it? Saying yes to me? She thought about the fear and the judgment. No, she said at last. I regret that being honest takes so much courage, but I do not regret choosing you. Cole turned to her, his face serious. I am going to do this right, Lillian. The way you deserve. There is a dance in town next Saturday. I want to take you in front of everyone. That will just stir up more talk. Good. Let them talk. Let them see I am proud to be with you. He took her hand. I want to leave them no doubt about my intentions or about your worth. She looked at his calloused hand holding hers. It felt strong and warm. But the fear was still there, whispering doubts in her ear. What if this was all a terrible mistake? What are you thinking? Cole asked softly. That I am scared, Lillian admitted. All my life I have been careful, and now I am doing something that feels reckless. This could ruin everything. It could, he agreed. But Lillian, being careful did not protect you back in Philadelphia, did it? It did not save you from anything. Maybe it is time to try something new. And if it all falls apart, we will face that too. I would rather we try and fail than live the rest of our lives wondering what might have been. He squeezed her hand. I cannot promise it will be easy. I cannot promise people will stop talking. But I promise I will be right here with you through all of it. I will never let anyone doubt that my feelings for you are real. Lillian looked into his eyes and saw the honest truth there. He meant what he said. He would face the trouble with her and defend her name like it was his own. A feeling of peace settled in her chest. She had been on her own for so long, fighting all her battles by herself. The idea of having a true partner was almost too much to hope for. But that is what Cole was offering. Not a rescue, but a partnership. All right, she said. Take me to the dance. Let them all see us. Let us show them what it looks like when we choose each other. Cole's smile was like the sun coming up. Thank you for trusting me, he said. Thank you for being brave. They stood together in the cool evening air, holding hands and watching the sun go down. The ranch around them grew quiet. It was a good life, Lillian thought. Hard, but good. Maybe now it could be about more than just getting by. Maybe it could be a real future built on teamwork and respect. Maybe this could finally be home. The week before the dance was a lesson in social warfare. News of Cole's interest in her spread through the area like a wildfire. Lillian felt the change in small ways. Some ranch hands who had ignored her before now tipped their hats. Others who had been friendly turned cold. The women in town watched her with sharp eyes, trying to figure her out. Cole, just as he promised, made it clear they were together. He walked with her to every meal and talked about her work on the ranch with so much pride that even the doubters had to listen. But the gossip did not stop. Lillian heard enough to know that people were still divided. Some thought she was courageous, others thought she was a schemer. The local newspaper even wrote a small piece about the Eastern woman who won a rancher's heart with her bookkeeping skills, which was both a compliment and an insult. Through it all, Lillian just kept her head down and worked. She finished with the main accounts and started helping Violet organize the household. She set up new systems for keeping track of supplies and found ways to save money. It was good, satisfying work, keeping her hands busy while her mind tried to spin itself into a mess over the upcoming town dance. The Saturday that came was so pretty it felt like the world was messing with her. The sky was clear as a bell, with just enough breeze to keep the evening comfortable. Lillian wore a deep green dress from Violet that she had taken in herself, a color that made her eyes shine. She never put much stock in appearances, but tonight the dress felt like putting on a suit of armor. Cole showed up at her door at 6 o'clock sharp, looking so handsome in a suit it nearly took her breath away. His eyes went wide when he saw her. "Lillian," he said, his voice a little rough, "you look absolutely beautiful." "And you," she replied, a small smile playing on her lips, "look like you've seen a ghost." He offered his arm. "I am scared, but I'm doing it anyway. Ready to face the music?" "Ready as I'll ever be." The wagon ride into town was quiet, each of them wrestling with their own worries. But then Cole's hand found hers, and some of the tightness in her chest eased. They were in this together. Whatever was coming, she would not be alone. The dance was in the town's main hall, a building that wore many hats. When they arrived, the party was already in full swing. A fiddle, a guitar, and a piano were making a joyful racket. Couples were already turning and gliding across the floor. Cole led Lillian straight out there and pulled her into a dance like he had been doing it his whole life. "Well, I will be," she said, surprised. "I did not peg you for a dancer." "My mother made sure of it," he said with a quick grin. "Said a man ought to know how to lead a lady instead of stumbling around like a spooked calf." They danced without talking for a bit, and Lillian let the music wash over her. She could feel folks watching them, but the stares felt less mean than she had braced for, more like people were just taking her measure. When the song finished, Mrs. Patterson appeared with her daughter, Anne. "Mr. Mercer, would you mind if Anne had the next dance? I need a word with Miss Hartley." She asked it like a question, but it felt more like an order. Cole looked to Lillian, who gave a small nod. "Of course, Mrs. Patterson." As Cole and Anne took to the floor, Mrs. Patterson steered Lillian toward the punch bowl. They watched the dancers for a moment before Mrs. Patterson spoke. "You carried yourself well at Sunday dinner." Not many women would have spoken up like that when accused. "I am not one to stay quiet." "I noticed. It is refreshing. You have got backbone, girl. Cole is going to need a woman with backbone." Lillian turned to her. "Mrs. Patterson, why are you telling me all this?" "Because I believe you are the real deal. And I believe Cole's feelings for you are too. The women in this town are split right down the middle about you. Some think you are a calculating woman, others think you are brave. Tonight is your chance to set the record straight." "And how do I do that?" "Just be yourself, honest and hard-working. Do not you dare apologize for a thing." For the next hour, Lillian navigated a minefield of questions. She answered straight, did not get defensive, and looked every last one of them right in the eye. Cole finally came to her rescue, pulling her back to the dance floor. "How did it go?" he asked. "I survived," she said. "Some are just curious. Others are hoping I am every bit the schemer they want me to be." She paused. "I might have been a little sharp with Mrs. Thornton, though. She hinted that I had done mighty well for myself, for a woman in my desperate situation." Cole's jaw set. "What did you say?" "I told her there is a big difference between being desperate and being ambitious, and she might understand that if she had ever had to work a day in her life." Cole let out a real, honest-to-goodness laugh. "Lillian, you are one of a kind." And just like that, Lillian felt the air in the room change. Some gazes were still cold, but others had softened. By the end of the night, several women had invited her to visit. It was not a complete victory, but it sure was not a loss. On the ride home, Cole said softly, "Thank you for tonight." "Nothing worth having comes easy," Lillian answered, "but I would rather face a hard time with you than an easy one alone." After a long moment, Cole spoke again. "Lillian, I need to tell you something. My father's decided to step back from the day-to-day running of the ranch. He's handing the reins over to me." "That is wonderful, Cole. You have earned it." "It is. And Lillian, I want you right there beside me making those decisions, not as an employee, as my partner." Her breath hitched. "Cole, Now, I am not proposing marriage. Not yet, anyway. It is too soon. But I need you to know where my heart is heading. When I picture the future of Copper Hollow, I see you, not just as my wife, but as the woman whose sharp mind and steady hands help build it." The word settled over her, warm and true. Partnership. Not just romance, but a shared purpose, built on respect. "I would like that very much, Cole," she said softly. When they got back, he walked her to her door. He kissed her hand, a small gesture full of big promises. "Good night, Lillian." "Good night, Cole." Inside, Lillian looked out at the dark mountains. She had arrived with nothing but her own grit. Now she had good work, respect she had earned fair and square, and the promise of a true partnership that saw her for all she was. The road ahead might still be bumpy, but for the first time in a long time, she was not afraid. For Lillian, finally putting down roots in Wyoming felt right, but it sure wasn't easy. The town watched her with suspicion, even as Cole Mercer made his intentions clear for all to see. He courted her openly, taking her on Sunday drives and to church, showing everyone she was his. But you could feel the difference between folks accepting a fact and them actually approving of it. That feeling was sharpest when she and Cole went to a big livestock auction one county over. This was more than just buying cattle. It was about showing the whole territory that Copper Hollow Ranch was strong and that she was a part of it. Lillian expected folks to be curious. She did not expect to be put on trial. During the lunch break, a group of ranchers' wives cornered her. Their smiles were as sweet as poison. A Mrs. Edmonds started. "Miss Hartley, we have heard so much about you. Is it true you are the one who exposed the foreman at Copper Hollow?" Lillian chose her words with care. "I found some serious problems in the ranch's books. The numbers pointed to someone stealing for years. Another woman chimed in, her own smile never reaching her cold eyes. How lucky for you that you found it, and even luckier that it led to you getting so close with Mr. Mercer. It was a trap, plain and simple. Lillian looked straight at Mrs. Edmonds. "Ma'am, can I ask what your role is on your husband's ranch?" The woman was taken aback. "Why, I run the household." "Do you handle the finances? Check the supply orders? Do you manage the payroll?" "Well, no," the woman said, getting flustered. "Those are tasks for the men." Lillian kept her voice steady. "Then maybe that is why you find my situation so peculiar. I was hired to do exactly that. It seems a woman's skill with numbers is more suspicious to you than a man's outright theft." The silence was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then a sharp laugh broke through. An older woman stepped forward. "Well said, girl. I am Margaret Caldwell. My husband and I built the biggest spread in Montana, and I've run it by myself for 8 years. She offered a tough, weathered hand to Lillian. "It is good to see a young woman who is not afraid to use her brain." Lillian shook her hand, feeling a wave of relief. "Thank you, Mrs. Caldwell." "Do not thank me yet. Your road is harder than most. People will always figure a woman gets ahead by trickery, not talent. The real question is, can you live with that?" "I have lived with worse," Lillian said softly. Margaret nodded. "My advice: stop wasting your breath trying to convince them. Just live your truth. The people worth knowing will see it. The rest do not matter." That advice settled deep in Lillian's soul. Stop trying to convince people. Just live. That evening she found Cole in the barn. He looked up and his whole face softened. "Learn anything today?" he asked. "I learned I should stop trying to prove my integrity and just live it," she told him, "and that the right people will see the truth." Cole stopped brushing a horse and came to her side. "That is good advice, but it is not always easy to follow." "Nothing worthwhile ever is," Lillian said, then took a deep breath. "Cole, I have to ask you, do you ever doubt me? Do you ever think they might be right?" "No," he said, instantly and without hesitation. "Not for a second." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I know what scheming looks like, Lillian. It is not you. You are the most honest person I have ever known. You speak the truth, plain and simple, and let others deal with it. After everything we have been through, that kind of real is what matters most." He gently brushed a stray piece of hair from her face. "I do not love you because it is easy," he said, his voice low. "I love you because you are true." The words filled the quiet barn, changing everything. "You love me," she whispered, as if testing the sound. "I do," Cole said. "I know it is fast, and we said we would take our time, but I cannot pretend it is anything else." "It is terrifying," Lillian admitted, "and overwhelming. And it is exactly what I needed to hear. Because I love you too, Cole Mercer. I have been fighting it, telling myself it was just gratitude. But it is not. It is love." A huge smile spread across Cole's face, bright as a sunrise. He pulled her into his arms and held her tight. In the warm, dusty air of the barn, Lillian finally felt like she was home. "Marry me," Cole murmured into her hair. Lillian pulled back, stunned. "What?" "Marry me. Not someday. Soon. Before the first snow." His eyes were completely serious. "I know people will talk. They will say you trapped me. But I do not want to waste a single day being careful when I am this sure about what I want. I want you as my wife and my partner." "People will talk," Lillian repeated, her heart pounding. "Then let them talk," he said, taking her hands. "We will prove them wrong by building a life so solid they cannot deny it. I am asking you to be my equal, to help me run this ranch, to stand beside me in everything. Your father already said yes. I asked him last week, just in case I worked up the nerve. Lillian laughed through sudden tears. You are serious? More serious than I have ever been about anything. She looked into his eyes and saw only love, offered freely. Every sensible bone in her body screamed that this was too fast, that it would only prove their critics right. But being careful had never saved her before. Taking a risk had. Choosing love over fear had. Yes, she said, her voice clear and strong. Yes, I will marry you. Cole kissed her then, a kiss full of promise for the life they would build together. We will tell your father tonight, and we will make it public tomorrow. We are not giving folks a chance to whisper behind our backs. They will whisper anyway. Then we will give them something real to talk about. A wedding that shows everyone exactly how much I value you. Just as Lillian figured, word of their engagement spread like wildfire and split the town right down the middle. Some people, like Margaret Caldwell and the Pattersons, sent warm congratulations. Others showed their disapproval with cold silence or sour comments about ambitious women. Lillian faced it all with her chin up. She offered sincere thanks for the good wishes and met the snide remarks with a calm gaze that gave them nothing to gossip about. The wedding was set for November, giving them 6 weeks to get ready. Violet threw herself into the planning, declaring that Copper Hollow would see a celebration for the ages. Samuel even became a surprising ally, telling anyone who questioned the short timeline that waiting around never made love stronger, it just wasted time. But the real test arrived 3 weeks before the wedding. Briggs returned. Lillian was in the office when she heard shouting from the main yard. She went to the window, and a cold dread washed right through her. Briggs was standing near the barn facing off with Cole while a group of ranch hands gathered to watch. Even from a distance, Lillian could see the tension in the air. She was halfway down the stairs when Violet grabbed her arm. Do not go out there, Violet said. This is between Cole and Briggs. It is about me. I know it is, which is exactly why you need to stay put. Cole can handle this. Lillian hesitated, torn. Through the window, she saw Briggs waving his arms, his face red with either anger or drink. Cole stood perfectly still, his calm more threatening than any shout. What is he saying? Lillian whispered. Nothing but poison and spite from a man who got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. But Violet's face was tight with worry. The whole thing lasted maybe 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. Finally, Samuel came out of the house and said something sharp that made Briggs stumble back. Then 2 loyal hands stepped up beside Briggs, making their point clear without a single word. The former foreman left, cursing as he went, but he was gone. Cole came inside moments later, his jaw clenched tight. He found Lillian and pulled her into his arms, without a word. What did he say? She asked against his shoulder. Nothing that matters. Cole, he sighed, pulling back to look her in the eyes. He said you manipulated your way into my life and my bank account. He said you faked the evidence against him. His voice was flat and controlled. He said I was a fool being led around by a pretty face. He said a lot of things that do not deserve repeating. And what did you say? I told him that if he ever set foot on Copper Hollow land again, I would have him arrested. I told him that his bitterness did not change the truth of what he did. And I told him that insulting my future wife was the surest way to make an enemy for life. The hands heard all of it, yes, and they watched me defend you without a second thought. Cole's expression softened a little. Lillian, some of them still have their doubts, but they also saw me stand my ground, and they know I am not a man who is easily fooled. Will that matter? Or will they just think you have blinded me? Time will tell, he said, and we have got the rest of our lives to prove them wrong. The showdown with Briggs became a turning point. Cole's solid defense forced people to choose a side. Some remained skeptical, but others began to wonder if maybe they had misjudged Miss Hartley. The wedding preparations continued, a blur of ranch work and dress fittings and countless small decisions. It felt like she was building something real with her own hands. Then Cole proposed a change that surprised everybody. At a meeting with Samuel and the senior hands, he announced that after the wedding, Lillian would take over as the official ranch administrator with full authority over all the money and planning. "She has proven herself capable," Cole said when one of the older hands questioned it. "She saved us thousands of dollars, and she showed better judgment than anyone else here. Why would I not give her the authority that matches her skill?" "Because she is a woman," the hand said bluntly. "And that matters why. Exactly." Cole's voice was dangerously quiet. "Does her gender make the numbers wrong? Does it change the fact that she caught fraud that everyone else missed?" The hand had no answer to that. Samuel finally spoke. "My son is right. Miss Hartley has earned her authority. Anyone who cannot work under a woman's direction can find employment somewhere else." It was a turning point. In the days that followed, Lillian noticed a change. The men who had been polite but cold started to treat her with a cautious respect. They might not like it, but they could not deny her competence. The wedding took place on a crystal-clear November day when the mountains wore their first light coat of snow and the air was sharp enough to bite. The ceremony was held right there at the ranch, in the valley that Lillian had come to love. She wore a simple but beautiful dress of cream wool, and Violet had woven sage and wildflowers into her hair. The guests were a mix of friends and neighbors. The Pattersons and Margaret Caldwell sat in the front row, their presence a public show of support that meant more than words. Behind them sat folks from town, some genuinely happy, others just curious. Lillian did not care why they were there. As she walked toward Cole, she saw only him, steady and certain, looking at her like she was the answer to every question he ever had. The ceremony was brief. The minister spoke about partnership and mutual respect, about building a life together, strong enough to stand against any storm. As they took their vows, Cole grabbed Lillian's hands, his voice carrying clear for all to hear. He promised to see her as his equal, to back her judgment, and to stand with her through every storm. Lillian, with tears in her eyes, promised him honesty and hard work, vowing to be a woman worthy of his trust. When the preacher declared them husband and wife, and Cole kissed her, the applause was heartfelt, even if some folks kept their hands in their pockets. But Lillian didn't need everyone's blessing. She had something far better, a partnership built on truth and grit. Later, as a fiddle played, Margaret Caldwell pulled her aside. "You went and did it," the older woman said, her eyes full of respect. "You built a life your own way." "I had a heap of help," Lillian admitted. "Don't you sell yourself short. Most women marry for a roof over their head. You married for a partner. That takes guts." Margaret then laid out a surprise. "I'm starting a ranching association for women, teaching them the books, how to handle contracts. I want you to be a part of it." Lillian was stunned. "Me?" Margaret just smiled. "You've shown this whole valley that a sharp mind matters more than being a man. Other women need to see that. Besides, being a Mercer gives your voice some weight. You ought to use it." The offer felt like both a reward and a dare. "I would be honored," Lillian said. As the party wound down, Cole found her watching the sunset. "Are you happy?" he asked, wrapping an arm around her. "More than I ever figured I could be," she confessed. "But I'm scared I'll wake up, and this was all just a fine dream." "This is no dream," he said, pulling her close. "We earned this, and we'll face whatever comes next together." He then told her the biggest news of all. "My father is signing over half the ranch to me as a wedding gift. He wants me to run it with you as my full partner." Lillian stared at him, trying to take it in. "Half the ranch?" He nodded, his face serious. "With your name on the deeds and the contracts. With you having just as much say in every single decision. I don't want you depending on my good mood or my father's kindness. I want you to have real power, real ownership." The idea stole her breath. It was more than a marriage. It was a revolution. It was everything she had fought for but never thought she would actually get. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes to all of it." 5 years down the road, Lillian stood in that same valley, their 3-year-old daughter chasing chickens while a baby boy slept on her shoulder. Copper Hollow was thriving. They had more land, better stock, and a reputation for being honest folks. The ranch had also become known as a place where a person's skill was all that mattered. Lillian's way with numbers was being copied by other ranches, and her training programs for women had spread across 3 territories. Cole walked up from the barn, a little gray at the temples, but with a smile that still made her heart jump. "Got word from Margaret Caldwell," he said. "The territorial government is thinking about her proposal for women's property rights. She reckons it might just pass." "That's because folks have seen that it can work," Lillian said softly. "Because we showed them." "No, honey, you showed them," Cole corrected her. "I was just smart enough to see it." She leaned against him, feeling the solid truth of it all. This was the life she had built. She had arrived with nothing but grit and 17 cents, and had faced down lies and judgment. She won not by changing who she was, but by proving who she was. A capable, honest woman who refused to be ashamed. The sun set, painting the mountains gold. Their home, Copper Hollow, settled in for the night. It was a place built on respect, on equality, and on a love they chose every single day. It all started with one simple thing: a woman who wouldn't be owned, and a man wise enough to offer her a partnership instead. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.